Welcome to my channel, USA Battle Zone. Today's story isn't just another tale from the front lines. This one changed everything. A single mistake, one moment of rage, one terrible sound, and within hours, the entire base was sealed, the soldiers removed, and the truth buried so deep that only whispers remained. Stay with me until the end, because what happened here still haunts those who survived. It began on a quiet night in late September, 1993. The wind was dry, carrying the scent of diesel and dust across a remote U.S. military base in Nevada, a place that didn't exist on most maps. Officially, it was a test site. Unofficially, it was where some of the most secret operations of the U.S. Army took place. The base was small, only a few dozen personnel, but the work was intense. Experimental aircraft, unknown missions, things no one outside the wire ever talked about. Among the soldiers stationed there was Sergeant David Harlan, a man known for his discipline, precision, and silence. He'd been in the Army for 12 years, served in 2 conflicts, and carried the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Harlan had earned his respect the hard way. But even the toughest men have cracks, and that night, those cracks split wide open. At around 9:40 p.m., the base was calm. Most of the personnel were inside the barracks or the operations building. A few guards patrolled the perimeter, their boots crunching on gravel under the pale glow of the floodlights. Inside the small research hangar, however, voices were rising, angry, sharp, echoing between steel walls. Sergeant Harlan was arguing with Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, a bright, determined intelligence officer who had joined the unit just 6 months earlier. She was younger, ambitious, and not afraid to challenge authority, especially when she thought something wasn't right. The two had clashed before, but this time, it was different. Monroe had discovered something in the classified data logs, strange flight patterns, odd radiation readings, and an unauthorized mission logged under Harlan's ID code. She confronted him directly, accusing him of covering something up. "No one goes near that hangar at night," she said, pointing toward the sealed bay at the far end of the building. "You think I don't notice the lights coming on at 2 a.m.? You think I don't hear the engines?" Harlan told her to drop it. He said she didn't understand what was at stake. But Monroe wouldn't stop. "If this is what I think it is, the Pentagon will want answers," she said. "I'm not part of your cover-up." That's when something inside Harlan snapped. No one knows if it was fear, guilt, or pure instinct, but he stepped forward, grabbed her by the arm, and when she tried to pull away, he struck her. The sound echoed in that hangar like a gunshot. Monroe fell hard, her head hitting the corner of a metal table. The crack of bone was sickening. She didn't move. For a long moment, Harlan just stood there, breathing hard, staring down at her still body. The lights flickered above. His mind raced. What had he done? It was an accident, he told himself. It had to be. He knelt beside her, checking for a pulse, but her skin was already cold. Panic washed over him. He looked around. The door was closed, the night guard would be outside soon. He had to think. He pulled her body into the shadows and covered her with a tarp, his hands shaking. He needed help, but who could he trust? The only man who knew what was really going on in that base was Colonel Reed, the commanding officer. Harlan ran through the dark corridors toward Reed's office. He burst in without knocking, his voice trembling. "Sir, it's Monroe. She's dead." "I didn't mean." Reed didn't react the way Harlan expected. He didn't shout. He didn't call for medics or MPs. He just stared for a long time, then closed the folder on his desk. "You weren't supposed to touch her," he said quietly. "Now we have a problem." Within 20 minutes, alarms started ringing. The base went into lockdown. Every exit was sealed, every vehicle stopped. Men ran in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Harlan was confined to quarters under guard, his weapon taken. He kept asking for a lawyer, for someone to listen, but no one answered. It was as if the chain of command had been erased overnight. Then, just before midnight, 3 black helicopters appeared on the horizon. They weren't marked. No insignias, no identification lights. They landed silently on the far end of the airstrip. Out stepped 3 men. Generals, each wearing a plain uniform with no visible rank or name. Only Colonel Reed met them. The rest of the base was ordered to remain indoors. The soldiers who watched from the windows said the scene didn't look like a normal military investigation. It was colder, quieter, deliberate. The generals went straight to the hangar where Monroe's body was hidden. The lights stayed on all night. Some claimed they heard machinery, heavy metallic sounds, like something being dismantled or burned. By morning, the hangar was empty. No body, no evidence, just the smell of oil and bleach. When the sun rose, the generals called everyone to the assembly yard. They told the soldiers the base was being decommissioned immediately. Every piece of equipment would be transported, every file erased. No one was to speak of what they'd seen or heard. Within hours, convoys rolled out, and the base, which had been active for over a decade, was shut down. Harlan was never seen again. Officially, he was transferred to another facility. Unofficially, no one could find his name in any database after that day. Monroe's family was told she died in an aviation accident during a classified training mission. They were given a folded flag and a sealed casket that, according to one of the men who transported it, weighed far too little to hold a body. For years, that's where the story ended. The records vanished, the base was erased from maps, and the people who had served there were scattered across other units. But some of them, the ones who couldn't sleep, kept talking, in whispers. They said what really happened wasn't about a fight or an accident. It was about what Monroe had discovered. 2 decades later, a retired technician named Carl Denton came forward. He'd been a radar operator at that base, and he'd kept a personal journal, hidden in a false panel of his home. In it, he described seeing strange blips on his screen, aircraft that appeared out of nowhere, hovered at impossible speeds, then vanished. They said it was just experimental drones, he wrote, but those things didn't move like anything we've ever built. The logs Monroe found were tied to those same sightings. She had uncovered data proving the base wasn't testing new American aircraft, it was tracking something else. Something not from us. The unauthorized flights she accused Harlan of were real, but he wasn't behind them. He was part of the cleanup crew, assigned to recover whatever those aircraft left behind. Debris, artifacts, bodies, maybe, and whatever she saw that night in the sealed hangar, it terrified her. One of the technicians claimed that she'd told him, just hours before her death, "They lied to us. It's not human." When the generals arrived, they weren't there to investigate a murder. They were there to contain a breach, to erase the evidence Monroe had found. Harlan had become a liability, too. If he hadn't been eliminated, he was silenced in a way that ensured no one would ever hear from him again. Years passed. The desert reclaimed the old base. The runways cracked, the fences fell. But sometimes, people still go out there. Urban explorers, ghost hunters, conspiracy seekers. And every now and then, someone brings back something strange, a piece of scorched metal with no identifiable origin, or a recording of low-frequency hums echoing through the air, like distant engines still turning. One man, a former drone pilot, said he drove out there in 2015 to see it for himself. He said the place felt wrong, quiet in a way that pressed against your ears. The hangar was still standing, barely. Inside, under years of dust, he found a faded military patch, Harlan's unit insignia, torn clean through. When he brought it back to his truck, the radio started picking up static, not random noise, but rhythmic bursts, like Morse code. He wrote down the sequence, and when he translated it later, it spelled one word: run. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not, but the legend of that night continues to grow, the night when a single act of violence uncovered a truth too big for anyone to handle. Some say Harlan regretted it instantly, that he wasn't a murderer, just a soldier pushed beyond his limit, trying to protect something he couldn't even explain. Others think Monroe's death wasn't an accident at all, but part of a cover-up that was already in motion. Maybe she was never meant to leave that base alive. Maybe she knew too much. What's certain is this: within hours of her death, 3 of the most powerful men in the U.S. military arrived at a remote facility in the desert, and by dawn, it was gone. No press releases, no reports, just silence, and that silence still echoes. To this day, people driving through that stretch of Nevada desert sometimes see lights hovering low over the sand, moving in ways no plane can. Locals call it the curse of Base Echo. Some claim it's just military tests continuing underground. Others think it's the past, replaying itself. The night Monroe tried to tell the truth and paid the price. There's one more piece, though, one final detail that came from an anonymous letter sent to a journalist in 2019. The letter was written on old, military-style stationery, and signed only with the initials, DH. It said, "Greater than, I didn't mean to hurt her. She was right. They weren't ours. When they came for me, they said they could make it all go away. But some things don't go away. Not even when the base is gone. If you're reading this, don't trust them. Tell her family she was brave." The journalist tried to trace the source, but every path led to dead ends, fake addresses, empty storage units, and disconnected numbers. But the handwriting was real, and the paper was dated from the early 1990s. Whether it was Harlan or not, no one can say for sure. What we do know is that a secret base in the desert was shut down overnight, and the truth was buried under concrete, lies, and silence. But the people who were there, they still remember. They remember the sound of helicopters in the dark. They remember the orders to pack up and forget. And they remember the look in Monroe's eyes the last time anyone saw her alive. Sometimes, when I think about this story, I imagine Harlan in those last moments, standing in that hangar, staring at what he couldn't understand, trying to follow orders, trying to protect something he shouldn't have seen. One choice, one blow, one life gone, and with it, the truth. If this story reaches you tonight, wherever you are, remember that behind every classified file, every erased name, there's a human story. Pain, regret, courage, and silence. The kind of silence that can swallow whole histories if no one speaks. Thank you for staying until the end. This story isn't about proving what's real or fake. It's about what happens when truth meets fear, and when duty crosses the line into darkness. If you believe Monroe deserved justice, or if you think stories like this should never be forgotten, hit that like button, share this video, and help keep these voices alive. Because somewhere out there, in the cold Nevada night, a soldier's soul is still waiting for someone to finally listen. This is USA Battle Zone. Subscribe for more true, forgotten, and hidden stories from the heart of America's military shadows. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop asking questions. Would you like me to format this story with pacing and time cues, like a narrated YouTube script with scene directions, sound effects, and pauses? That version would make it feel like a real video narration, not just a story, perfect for uploading.